The Godfather Part 3 is a film released in 1990, the much hyped but disappointing sequel to the first two classic films in the series, The Godfather Part 1 and The Godfather Part 2, all three of which were directed by Francis Ford Coppola. In the third film that we got, we follow an older and worn-out Michael Corleone seeking redemption for his many sins and becoming entangled in an embezzlement plot involving the Vatican. The movie was not well received by audiences and critics alike, and as many Godfather film fans know, many changes were made before production, and even during production of the film, and the final result featured many changes from what was originally planned. Robert Duvall was supposed to be in it, for example, as he was in the first two films as Tom Hagen, but disagreements over his pay between the studio and the actor meant he ended up dropping out, and eventually the entire story of the film was changed, which initially featured Hagen and Michael Corleone turning against each other and fighting for control of the Corleone family. That's a lot different from the final film, of course, and it's just one of many changes that were made, for the worse I might add. And I think most of us can agree that, because while The Godfather Part 3 is a decent film, it's nowhere near as good as it could have been. So what am I reviewing today? It can be quite a confusing lore of the Godfather universe, because while there might be just one original book and 3 films, there's 4 sequel books, one written by Mario Puzo, the original author, called The Sicilian, which is almost completely disconnected from the Godfather universe anyway, and the others are commissioned by the Puzo estate. There's also video games, numerous altered or cancelled ideas for sequel films, and even a script floating around there somewhere apparently for a Godfather Part 4. And one Puzo script for Part 4 was adapted by Ed Falco for a novel written in 2012 called The Family Corleone. So the script I'm reviewing today is a draft for Part 3 that was written in 1979. It's not the one with Hagen and Michael fighting. I don't think a script for that version actually exists. Perhaps one of the most interesting things about this script is the year it was written in. The Godfather Part 2 was released in 1974, and this was written in 1979. It suggests that even back in the 70s they were thinking of making another sequel to The Godfather, even though Francis Ford Coppola has said he was done with it. And one of the major complaints about Part 3 we got in 1990 was that they had waited too long to make it. With a draft written in 1979, you could say that it might have been finalized the next year or so, shall we say, and they could have, in theory, started filming soon and got the film out in theatres in the early or mid-1980s, which is a decent gap for a sequel, especially one with a story where, as we'll discuss, takes place quite a while after the second film. So this one was written by Dean Reisner, based on a story by Mario Puzo. Reisner is the writer of a few Clint Eastwood flicks like Dirty Harry, The Enforcer, and Play Misty for Me. So if they went and made this one, it would have been the only one not written by Coppola and Puzo. I don't know what the situation was with this script. I don't know if it was ever commissioned by Paramount. I don't know if it was ever passed to Coppola for him to start thinking about making it, or whether he had any input in it. I don't know if the studio liked it or considered even making it. All I know is that there's a script out there on the internet written by Reisner in 1979, and I've read it. Now, as I'm reviewing a script today, I don't really have any appropriate images or videos to show you. So here, say hello to my fish and turtles. It's quite a wonderful little family in that tank. Anyway, so let's talk about what the screenplay is about, and then how good I think it is and how I think it compares to the final film we got. So in this script, the opening scene is set shortly after the second film, maybe a few days even. We're at the boathouse where Fredo was murdered. Tom Hagen is there, as are a few Corleone goons, Connie Corleone in her only scene in the script if I remember correctly, and Michael's 2 kids. Anthony is about 10 and he looks out solemnly to the lake, and then Hagen and Connie usher the kids into the car and they drive off. Michael Corleone watches from a distance through a window of his home. The rest of the film is set years later, with Anthony a grown man, and him as the main character. The implication here in this opening is that the children are going to live with their mother Kay. Michael will send checks every month, but there's no indication that Michael ever meets his kids again until a long time later in the script. That's quite interesting, isn't it? It's almost like a prequel to the Part 3 we actually got in 1990. So there's 2 things I found significant in this scene. The first is that among the Corleone crew is Rocco Lampone. That I found really weird, and I just didn't get it. He dies in part 2, and they never explain his appearance in this film, and he's got a much more major role in the film. Maybe his name on the script is a stand-in for a new character. Maybe old Dean forgot that Rocco snuffed it after he shot Hyman Roth. I don't know. But he's a major part of the Corleone upper hierarchy. If you remember in the first film, for example, the characters around Don Vito Corleone are the likes of Tessio, Clemenza, Hagen and Sonny. In this one, after the short opening, the film jumps a few decades and the main crew is made up of Tom Hagen, Al Neri, Rocco Lampone, Frankie Rizzi, who is the son of Carlo and Connie, and Santino, the son of Sonny, who of course was played by Andy Garcia in the actual Part 3, and whose name in that version is Vincent. In this one he's got a much smaller role, though is still just as hot-headed. There's also one or two other new characters as well who make up the Corleone capo regime. The second big thing with this opening is that it's one of only 3 or 4 times Michael Corleone is in the film. You heard that right. He makes a quick cameo here, then is absent for the entire duration of the film, and he pops up near the end in a few short scenes, including the final shot. And that's it. Can you believe that? He's the star of the first 2 films, but his role in this script is really just a cameo. The Corleone crime family is run by Tom Hagen, and we're given tidbits of information that suggests Michael has become a kind of Howard Hughes type hermit. He just spends all his time in his house, no one ever sees him, and he seems to have no control over the Corleone family, unless Tom is secretly taking orders from him, which might be the case. If you remember that last shot of The Godfather Part 2, where a slightly older Michael is sitting by himself in his garden, that's probably what he spends all his time doing in this script. But it's still incredible to think that someone sat down and decided to write a Godfather script in the late 70s, Pacino at the height of his stardom, and they just thought, you know what, let's just have him pop up, say hi, and then piss off until after the story is finished. It's balmy. So just in case you're wondering, there is pretty much no connection between this script and The Godfather Part 3 released in 1990. Everything is different. The story, the characters, the themes. There's only one scene that is the same, almost exactly the same. That part where Vincent is sleeping with a reporter and 2 men come and try to kill him. That is the only scene from this script that makes it into the final film, except in this version the character is Anthony, Michael's son. So what is the story of this script? Well, funnily enough, in a way it's very much like Martin Scorsese's The Irishman in terms of the real life events it's concerned with. All of the Godfather films are fictional stories, but they have their basis in real life events. There really were 5 major New York crime families, for example, and Mo Green was based on Bugsy Siegel, Hyman Roth on Meyer Lansky. The mob had business interests in Cuba with casinos and gambling and such, and they were all thrown out after the uprising of Fidel Castro, as the second film shows. This one's events are linked to that. Anthony Corleone is all grown up and he's working for the CIA, and he's assigned a job to take part in an assassination attempt of Fidel Castro. He's not named Fidel Castro in the script, but it's blatantly supposed to be him. The US government tried to take him out on numerous occasions in real life, and there are strong suggestions, as shown in The Irishman, that one of the CIA's attempts involved working with the Italian-American mafia to get to Castro. And in this film, Anthony makes a deal with Tom Hagen and the Corleone family where they will help him and the government to assassinate the Cuban revolutionary. In return, the Corleones will get a bucket of cash, but also the promise of an early release of the former president of the International Brotherhood of the Teamsters. Again, it isn't called the Teamsters in the script, but you know that's what they're basing it off of. Tom Hagen tries to get a loan from the current boss of the Teamsters for a new casino, but he's unable to do so, and so the Corleones want the old boss, who's in jail, freed so he can become the president again and get the mob the loans thereafter. That imprisoned president is of course based on Jimmy Hoffa, who famously did deals with the mob in real life and was played by Al Pacino in The Irishman. The president who isn't in jail has a close alliance with one of the heads of the other New York families, and after Tom Hagen tries to put the squeeze on him, this president phones up his mob buddy and a war ensues between the Corleones and this other family. Interestingly, the name of the imprisoned president in the script is Danny Devito, and he's also described as being as wide as he is tall. I don't know whether they had the actual Danny Devito in mind for this role and used his name as the placeholder for the actual character, but it sure seems like it, and I can definitely see him in the role. He of course would go on to direct and star in a Hoffa biopic with Jack Nicholson in the 1990s. Now, most of the story is concerned with Anthony. He's the main character for sure. He goes through his training, he gets his assignment, he sets it up, he makes friends and enemies along the way, he goes to Cuba, joins up with some anti-revolutionaries, and the climax of the film is a failed assassination attempt, with Tony and his Cuban crew shooting and blasting their way through El Presidente's palace and then fighting for their lives to get out of the country on a plane, with Tony being the only one who does so successfully. The mob stuff, with Hagen trying to get the loan for the casino, the beef between the Corleones and the other family, all of that stuff is really in the background, and that's one of the key issues with this script, which is that it isn't a mob movie, it's an espionage film, a film tackling covert CIA operations. If anything, with a few big shootouts and a car chase, it's an action film, and it's far more concerned with Washington politics than it is concerned with mob politics. I get it, it's very well done, showing how the American government is the real mafia, how it meddles in the affairs of foreign nations. The script is very much concerned with themes of hypocrisy of the government, corruption, things like that. They even have a scene with the CIA training some Saudi Arabian terrorist, which was very interesting seeing as though this was in the 1970s. And it is decades later that we have video evidence of the likes of Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump admitting that the US train, fund and provide arms to terrorist organizations. It's a very interesting subject to tackle, and I do think this could have been a great film if the script was a little polished up, but it just isn't a Godfather movie. It has very little to do with the Corleones. It has practically nothing to do with Michael Corleone. It almost feels like someone wanted to make a movie about America, Fidel Castro and the CIA's relationship with the mob, and they sprinkled in a bit of Godfather to give the film some juice for the Hollywood suits looking to make some money. I just think audiences would have rejected it. It sounds interesting, even if it was a little predictable at the end when it turns out certain figures in the government have been in league with the Corleones' mob rivals. But I just think people wouldn't have liked this film because it strays so far away from what the original films were about. I seriously can't get over Michael only having a cameo. Even though the third film isn't amazing, I still think the direction it went in was a lot more interesting, focusing on an older Michael Corleone coming to terms with his past. That's a far more interesting subject to tackle for a Godfather film. I never really found Anthony to be that interesting as a main character. Michael is way more intriguing. Throughout the script, I was thinking, what's Michael doing all this time? Where is he at this present moment? What is he like? Has he changed or has he doubled down on his coldness and sense of isolation from the world? And then when he shows up at the end, when he tells Anthony that he had Fredo killed, he actually admits it, and that's the kind of things this life makes you do. You sit up in your seat a little. But then after a few pages, the script is over, and with Anthony having turned away from the government, sickened at its hypocrisy and indecency, which involved trying to have him killed after the assassination attempt, whether it was successful or not, and Anthony decides to go to work for his father, the implication being that he'll be groomed to be the next Don. It's a bit predictable, as mentioned, and it does feel a bit of a tacked-on ending to give Michael Corleone an excuse to show up. But I just didn't feel there was much power behind it, because it was kind of like, I don't like my dad, I think he's evil, I'll work for the government, oh hey ho, they're evil too, go figure, why don't I just join my dad and the mafia then? It's a bit blunt, and, I'll say it one more time, predictable. In The Godfather Part 2, we are following the assassination attempt of Michael Corleone and the betrayal of Fredo, Hyman Roth and all of that stuff, and it is set against the backdrop of the Cuban Revolution. But the revolution has nothing to do with the main story. Here, there's a kind of inverse. Anthony's assassination assignment is the main story, and that is set against the backdrop of a mob war between the Corleones and their rivals over the Teamsters pension fund. And it just feels as though things have moved too far away from the days of Vito coming home to his wife with a pear, or Sonny kicking the shit out of Carlo. It's a bit like Jurassic Park. The first few had dinosaurs going out of control. But by the time the fourth one came along, they were oversized mutant hybrid freaks turning invisible. It's just gone too far. I can see the template of this script being taken, moulded and transformed into the basis for a very strong political film, but it doesn't work as a Godfather movie. Most people who would watch this flick would spend the runtime wondering when Michael Corleone will show up, like how people were gobsmacked that Halloween 3 didn't have Michael Myers in it. And because of that, they wouldn't give the assassination storyline a chance. And why would they? They came for a Godfather film. All in all, I think this screenplay is a failure because of a lack of connective tissue with the previous films and bizarre decisions like having Michael a recluse and a CIA operative the main character. It could be a good film if the Godfather connection was taken out. For more videos, consider subscribing to the channel, and thanks for watching.